All right.
It had to be something good, or I'd been with you all. Especially since it was a credit meeting. It was to get that.
Right, no, fair enough. I don't think it's going to take very long at all, but it'll like a couple minutes, like actually 2 or 3 minutes on the agenda, so I want to make
Well, good morning. It's 9 o'clock, and we will begin. We appreciate you being here. It kind of seems like you're out there in the other county someplace, but we do appreciate you being there. We can see you. Hopefully you can see us. Got a good agenda for today, and we will plan to proceed with it. First item is the consent items. We are going to remove from the agenda item 4E. We will move that to the April meeting, but we will not consider it today. Other than that, the agenda as published is one we will follow. We need approval of the that agenda with that modification and the minutes of our last meeting. Got a motion? Is there a second? Got a second. Any questions? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to the first report item, which is a report on student, teacher, school performance. And David.
Thank you, Chair and members. This is the annual
beard and glasses and looking very.
Go get a new suit tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chair and members. This is the annual report that we are required statutorily to present. It has been submitted as of yesterday to the House and Senate Education Committees and to the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor's office. These contain the data that you voted to track in 2009. You'll see a lot of very similar numbers to those reported in the joint report, which we do with THEC each year. Some of those numbers overlap, but I would be happy to answer any questions. You might notice, different from prior years' reports, we've made an effort to heavily footnote these data so that you can see exactly how these were derived, where they came from, what future reports might hold once those data become available. And I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions for David? We've had a chance to look at this report on several different occasions, yesterday included. I think we need to recognize that some of the targets that we have in there are very aspirational targets. I think they're appropriate, but we've got some challenging goals out in front of us and a long way to go. But got programs in place to hopefully achieve these goals. Any questions for David on the performance report? Okay.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, David. Move to report item B, which is a report on teacher characteristics and effectiveness. Who is going to do that? Okay. Nate, is it?
Yeah, it is. Thank you. And I do have a few slides. Someone
Okay, yes,
pressed
please.
a button for me recently that I don't know where it was to actually get this started. Does anyone know how to turn things on? So I can also
Kevin, we can introduce him while they were figuring out the.
Yeah, well, while they worry about the technology, I'll just introduce Nate Schwartz, who joined the department recently, some months ago, and is heading up our internal research team. So we have not had an internal research team before in the department and are very excited to now have a functional internal research team that can do two things. One is work with outside researchers to make sure that we are conducting studies on the efficacy of our work. But the other is to do internal data analyses for all of our teams. And Nate and his team have quickly become the most popular unit in the Tennessee Department of Education. So I'm sure you will be hearing from him a fair amount in the years to come.
Great. Appreciate that.
I think I can just get started actually without these slides. So thank you so much for having me here. As Kevin said, it's my first time here. I walked up from the Andrew Johnson building and took 3 wrong turns around the Capitol. So if I still seem freezing cold, that's the reason. We were asked to look at the relationship between teacher effectiveness, TVAS scores, and the various teacher characteristics that go into the teacher salary schedule. So specifically teacher years of experience and teacher degree attainment. And there's been a lot of prior research that you've all probably heard of looking into these relationships. What research tends to show, and what I'm going to show you now, assuming these slides come up, is that there is a very, very slight relationship between teacher effectiveness and increasing student test scores over. Oh, there we go. Great. That's what they pay me for. Thank you so much. So what prior research has shown is that there is virtually no relationship between teacher degree attainment, having a master's degree, having a PhD, having a doctorate in education, and teacher effectiveness in raising student test scores. There is a very, very slight relationship in the first few years of a teacher's teaching. So teachers tend to get better over about the first 3 years of their practice, and then after that, things look fairly stable. What we did was we just looked at TVAS scores for Tennessee teachers in 2011-12 and investigated the same relationships. So what I'm going to show you now is just a few distributions of TVAS scores. Remember, TVAS is level 1 teacher is the least effective teacher, level 5 is the most effective, and how those distributions look for different buckets of teacher degrees and teacher experience levels. So this first slide here, which is a little small from I think your angle, but what you see here is the first bar there is teachers who have less than 5 years of experience. We go progressively up. Teachers with 5 to 10 years of experience, teachers with 11 to 20 years of experience, and teachers with more than 20 years of experience. The basic takeaway point here, sorry the numbers are so small, is that there is virtually no difference between any of these distributions. So dark green is the percentage of 5s, the percentage of teachers with a level 5 TVAS score in any of those categories. The red is the percentage of teachers at a level 1. And again, what you see is that around 50% of teachers in each of these groups are scoring a level 4 or 5, are the teachers that we deem effective. That doesn't really change. There's very, very slight fluctuation, but nothing meaningful. What you can't quite see on the top, but what you might see if you have the slides in front of you, is the average salary for each of these teacher groups. So we see that teachers who have less than 5 years of experience typically make about $37,000. Teachers with over 20 years of experience make about $56,000 on average. We can look at the exact same type of distribution for teachers with different degrees. Again, the reason it hardly looks like I shifted slides is because what you see is the same type of thing, that there's there's little to no relationship between the level of degree attainment and the degree that a teacher has, and the level of effectiveness of that teacher. Again, we can see big differences in salaries because most districts tend to follow the steps and lanes schedule, where salary is based on degrees and years of experience and the interaction between those two things. So teachers with a bachelor's degree typically make about $40,000. Teachers with a master's or a master's plus 30 are making over $50,000. And then this final one is actually breaking up teacher effectiveness by salary. So what we see is what we can ask here is do teachers who make higher salaries actually look more effective than teachers who make lower salaries? What we'd guess, because salary is, again, based on years of experience in education, is that we wouldn't see a relationship, and we don't. These last two slides are showing scatter plots of the same type of thing. So on the x-axis there, along the bottom, we can see the increase in teachers of years of experience. On the y-axis, we have actually a teacher effect score. So now we're no longer looking at 1 through 5, but this allows us to get a little bit more granular at how effective a teacher is. And what you see here is if teachers made greater gains with their students as experience went up, this blob of dots in the middle here would slope upward. What we don't see any upward slope. If you were to draw a trend line here, the trend line would go basically directly across. Another way of thinking of that is how much of the difference in teacher effectiveness can be explained by teachers' years of experience? And the answer is about 0.2%. So almost nothing about teachers differ wildly in effectiveness, as you know, but almost nothing about that can be explained by the number of years of experience that a teacher has. And the same thing here, teachers differ wildly in effectiveness. We can see a number of teachers who make so the x-axis here is salary. We can see a number of teachers who make a very low salary, who end up very high on the teacher effectiveness scale, and a number of teachers who make a very low salary who end up very low on the teacher effectiveness scale. And the same thing, as we move to the right along that graph, we can see a lot of teachers who make a very high salary, who are very low in effectiveness, and a lot of teachers who make a high salary who are very high in effectiveness. The salary explains, I think it's about, also about 0.2% of the variation in teacher effectiveness. So I can go into this a little more or answer questions, but that's what I brought.
Okay, questions? Mike? I said question, not statement. Go ahead.
You know, we're starting off today like we ended yesterday, aren't we? Okay, so Nate, so these will be a series of questions, and then you can answer them. One, would this information tend to argue against the traditional salary schedule and more performance? Two, are there any exceptions that you found when you more granularly looked at individual subjects? Like, would a master's in math predict, or would someone who has a higher competency in a subject matter, particularly in those that are hard to fill, would that be an exception? And the reason I ask that is because yesterday we saw that last year we certified something like 200 plus math teachers, 16 physics teachers, and one might conclude that it's the entry-level salary for those that are a barrier to people who can master those hard subjects for a lot of people from going into the teaching profession. So I would think salary would get involved in that. And if that's the case, if you're attracting in general more people who are barriered out because of what they can earn on the outside, if you were to bring in a higher cadre of people, would that potentially raise the overall range from where it is now to just upwards, so that we're getting closer to that 55%? Sorry for the multi-question.
Sure. So let me start with your first question about what do these findings say about the traditional salary schedule, and I guess I would say that there might be lots of justifications for the traditional salary schedule, but none of them have to do with teacher performance. So that if we wanted to pay solely based on the effect that a teacher is having on their student gains, we are not getting at that with the traditional salary schedule. The next question is, are there exceptions? If we divide this out in certain ways, if we look particularly at math and science teachers and math and science degrees, do we find anything different? Our data doesn't, this particular data set that we have doesn't allow us to actually look at what the teacher got a master's or got a PhD in. So we can see, do math and science teachers who attain any master's degree look better than math and science teachers who have not attained a master's degree? The answer there is no. But a lot of those math and science teachers might be getting masters in education or might be getting masters in other subjects. There have been lots of studies other than the quick look that we took at this, and there have been some relationships that have been found. Let me see. The teachers' ACT score and the selectivity of their undergraduate college tends to be very weakly, but associated with teacher effectiveness. There is some evidence that in some of these areas, like math and science, having a greater content knowledge does boost your effectiveness with students. Those relationships are still weaker than you might want. And one of the explanations in the field is that really knowing math and science is not enough to be a good math and science teacher, that you need pedagogical content knowledge. You need knowledge of math and how to teach math and the types of mistakes students make. And so there are a number of people now trying to write tests that might assess teachers' pedagogical content knowledge, that might assess how good are you at actually teaching these difficult content areas versus just knowing these content areas for yourself. So that seems like a promising direction, but they haven't found very strong links so far in the way you're talking about. The last piece you asked about is, as you said, we do have these hard to staff areas like math and science, and could the entry salary be a barrier in attracting the people that we want to attract? I think the answer is yes. There have been a number of studies of giving salary incentives to teachers in hard to staff areas, whether we're talking bringing teachers to high poverty schools or getting teachers into areas like math and science where we're having trouble attracting the people we want to attract. And those salary incentives seem to work in bringing more people into the field and overall bringing slightly more effective people into the field.
Okay. Other questions?
One quick question, I guess, of the commissioner. I guess, in light of this information, how will we use this data and research to inform our work at the state level, and also how can we help encourage districts to rethink how they compensate and reward teaching?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and we would love any guidance from you all on that. As you know, we present to you a salary schedule in the summer of every year for approval, and I know last year there was some consternation on the board about the salary schedule that was presented in as much as it lined up with the factors that we just looked at, and we at that time said we wanted to do some analysis, and we are certainly open to guidance and direction from you all. The districts ultimately need to take some ownership over how they construct their own salary schedules, but I think the guidance that this board provides is really, really important, because more often than not, districts basically follow what this board approves as its state salary schedule.
I think that obviously looking at this data, it just confirms, I guess, some of our suspicions that we've had of how performance relates to these various factors that you looked at. I think that, and just speaking for myself and get other board members to tie into this, I think we've got to ask the department to take a look at this data, to really come back to us with a plan that permits better alignment between pay and performance. We've got to have, I think, to get to where we need to get, pay that is determination, a pay system that is based more on performance than on some of these other factors that we've been using. Now, I think in addition to that, the other factor is one that Mike and Nate applied to, is that we've got to have some recognition in the pay system for these difficult to staff, getting competitive salaries with what these individuals could get outside. So those two factors, but I think that it's just imperative that we get better alignment between pay and performance if we're going to get the job done we need to get done. Now, I guess I'm speaking for myself, but is that the consensus on the board? Okay, Carolyn?
I just had a question about the breakdown of the number of teachers that this study would include. I know that not all of our teachers have available TVOS information. So we have a large number of employees, teachers, and other specialists who do not come under that plan. So how will we assess a similar or do similar reporting with that group, and what percentage of our teachers are under the TVOS reporting system?
Right. So those numbers that you saw were only for teachers who received individual TVOS scores in 2011-12. That's about 35% of our total teachers. And as you know, we do have final evaluation scores for all the teachers in our system. Those include observation scores. Those include the 15% achievement component that the teacher picks in conjunction with the evaluator, and those include a school-level TVOS score. So we have started to do some breakouts of what does teacher effectiveness look like for these different groups. We haven't actually started to divide that up by looking, say, at observation scores for teachers who do not have individual TVOS and their experience levels and their degree levels, and we could get into that, but we haven't done that yet. We've just started to break out effectiveness by these different groups so far.
Okay. Good question. Questions, comments? You know, one thing, Nate, I guess I've always felt like that the experience during, the first several years, first 5 years or so, ought to have a beneficial impact as far as performance. It appears from your data that there is either no relationship or very little relationship in the first 5 years. I think you mentioned maybe 3 years there was a slight effect or something.
Sure. In our data, we do not see a very large difference between teachers in their first several years of experience and teachers who have a few more years than that. That said, what the breakouts that I was showing you there were only using this 1 through 5 scale. So not necessarily getting as deep as you might want to, not using the actual teacher effect measured as a value added component. When that has been done and when a whole series of statistical techniques and controls have been used, people do tend to find that teachers in those first 5 years get better over those first 5 years and do look a little bit better 5 years in than they looked at the start. It's not a huge effect, but there's some.
Okay. Kevin?
Yep. I would just also note that the fact that evidence doesn't show teachers getting stronger over time is actually, as much as anything, an indictment of the weakness of professional development that is offered. Mm-hmm. And if we had stronger professional development, one would presume that you would see performance increase over time with exposure to stronger professional development. But the reality is, as the Comptroller's Office noted in a recent report, the professional development offered by school districts is all over the map, and frequently teachers find it not particularly helpful.
Yes, Janet?
Just a comment, because this is where I came in. When I joined the board, it was the heated discussion about the base salary and what we based the suggestions on. And I think, Mike, that's when you were appointed or railroaded, I'm not sure which, to the task force to really study all of this. I just wanted to say it publicly that I hope that this study that you're doing in this beginning makes us to take a system that has two things happening. We have a very progressive look at how we're evaluating, and we have a very antiquated look at how we reimburse. And while I agree that the districts need some responsibility in that, it's like starting somebody out at minimum wage. You're building on a very arbitrarily held down base. So it's going to be hard to get them up to a competitive wage when that antiquated system of assessing salaries is so low. I mean, you're operating on a floor instead of really looking at the whole system. So I hope we continue this work, Mike and others and all of us, because I think this is a good step, and but I just don't want it to stop because I don't think we've got them matched up yet.
Okay, good comment. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, well,
Thank you.
we'll ask the department to be working on this and to really come back with some proposals or recommendations for how we can better align pay with performance and address the issues that we've identified here.
Thank you.
Nate, appreciate it. Good job. Appreciate it. Okay, we will now move to our items for approval on first reading. The first is the teacher licensure standards. And Heather, okay.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Board. Put that in my way a little bit. Can you still hear me? Yeah. I'll address the teacher licensure standards, and I'm happy to go into more detail individually. But the reasoning behind the majority of these changes is actually that these licensure standards are designed to cover the type of curriculum that happens at a post-secondary institution in which a teacher goes to be prepared, so a teacher prep program. There's three specific ones that we're recommending to remove due to the fact that these programs no longer exist for teacher preparation programs. So there are no teachers currently in these programs, nor are they offered throughout our state. It's very important that the removal of these programs does not affect teachers who currently hold any endorsement previously associated with, and that we as a department have employment standards and endorsements to allow teachers to enter into these specific areas regardless of whether or not a teacher preparation program exists. So it's actually more of a housekeeping issue where we're removing programs that have not existed for a while, and there's really no option for a teacher to enter into those. So those will be for your technology, engineering, health science, and trade and industry. There's another section in here that's actually the removal of superseded endorsements. And this is actually endorsements that have been superseded by newer endorsements with different requirements, with better requirements. And so we're suggesting the removal of these. Again, it does not affect any teacher who currently holds this endorsement or who is in the system. It's just a housekeeping issue to kind of consolidate that endorsement list. And then the last one that I'll kind of draw your attention to is the removal of dance education from career and technical education. So in the dance education employment standards, there's this section that says that dance teachers, if they don't hold a bachelor's degree, can get an endorsement in other trade and industry. We no longer issue the endorsement other trade and industry because it was a very wide, not very rigorous endorsement. And so it's related to endorsement that A, no longer is issued, and B, that is tied to a license that the dance teachers would have to do some very specific professional development surrounding career and technical education to advance that license, so it's not relevant for dance teachers. So it's really removing requirements that aren't relevant to dance teachers anyway, and they have a set of employment standards for those dance teachers. So again, not affecting those that currently hold it, just a housekeeping item of removing those that don't have application.
I kind of see, I guess, all of these as kind of technical corrections or housekeeping items. Any questions during this? Is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion, second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Okay, next is item B, career technical education rule update. You going to do that? Okay.
Yeah. So this one, similar to the housekeeping items of the first, we have actually, as a division, moved away from 7 very broad program areas and aligned with the national 16 career clusters, which are much more specific and provide a clear pathway for students on what post-secondary looks like. So what we're trying to do here is make a lot of revisions to these referenced program areas like trade and industry, which had everything underneath it, versus a very specific 16 different career clusters. So most of these are just language updates, and then also a move from the word vocational to career and technical, which again is just an outdated term that we're trying to update. So a lot of housekeeping items, but I will draw your attention to a few that do actually make a change over and above language. There are some old graduation requirements and paths for graduation that are pre-diploma project. And basically it references a technical path. And so those were some that we would like to remove from, but understand if there may still be students in the system that the board may not want to recommend that entirely being removed yet. And that's fine, we'll go with what that is, but just recognizing that that technical path is antiquated. Also for individuals who may still hold career ladder certificates. So you'll see some name changes in the section for career ladder, recognizing that teachers still have those endorsements, but with your approval, we'd just like to change that terminology, and again, we'll, revert to your suggestions on that as well. The occupational license, if you'll see that section, there's a lot of name changes. However, there are a few things that we're actually doing in that section, which is actually to consolidate a lot of the requirements from an apprentice occupational license to advancing to a professional occupational license. So in the current rule, you'll see that there's a required of a 3-day, 2-day training, 4 observations within their area. We've actually consolidated that and said that they just have to attend up to 5 days of training. That actually makes it so the teacher is forced to do it all at the same time, which is more beneficial to the teacher instead of getting these short 3-day, 2-day, and sometimes repeating information or not getting all the information. So we've consolidated that into a 5-day training. We've also expanded the observations from all within their program area to 3 within their program area and actually 1 outside. So recognizing that good instruction is good instruction, and a construction teacher could probably benefit greatly from looking at a really good math teacher and seeing what that instruction looks like. So it also provides a little more flexibility for the LEAs, where they may not have some of our more specific career clusters there. It will reduce on the travel time for the teacher to find one of those teachers in their area. And then the last, of course, is going to be surrounding the 18 hours that a occupational licensed teacher has to have to advance. Previously, it was 8 very narrowly approved programs, and we're just expanding that to any approved teacher preparation program. So that allows them to attend several different universities across the state.
Okay. Very good. Questions? Any questions for Heather? Is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Is there a second? Second. Okay. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. Good job. Okay, item C, work-based learning guide for policies, procedures. Casey?
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. I am excited to present this submission. It is in accordance to your policy that states approval of all guidelines for work-based learning should come to a vote here with you. This document governs all forms of work-based learning, including in-school, out-of-school, and professional networking opportunities. So this includes clinical internships, apprenticeships, school-based enterprises, transitional experiences, and other mentoring and job shadowing opportunities for students. There are 2 types of updates that you'll see in this guide in front of you. We have found that work-based learning has really had some fits and starts in the state, and we had received a lot of information from our teachers over the past year as we were looking at revising our programs of study to really focus on giving students the opportunity to practice and demonstrate skills that they are learning, higher level skills and knowledge in their coursework. And this is applicable to all areas of focus. So work-based learning can be found in academic areas, career and technical areas, special education, et cetera, across all of our high schools. So we brought together a work group that included academic teachers, career and technical education teachers, principals and directors, and members of industry that had hired students in these types of work-based learning opportunities, brought them together to talk about successes in work-based learning and also where there had been challenges. And that work group recommended some changes that you will see here. So there's two main types of changes to this document that is different from the 2007 guidelines that were approved. The first type of changes is our housekeeping and language items. So the changing of the use of the word vocational to career and technical education, updates of contact information, and you'll also see a different look and feel of the guide that is an updates of formatting of the templates and documents in there to align to the new branding and style guide adopted by the department. We feel like that's important to have that high quality communications across the board. The second type of update is in policy. So there are two large policy recommendations that came from that work group. We have seen an increase of the use of block scheduling across the state, and there were some barriers in the old guidelines to having high-quality work-based learning experiences in that type of schedule. There were also the higher increase of school-based enterprises. So students that were working in schools, whether that be a credit union, agriculture, et cetera, happening in the schools, that we wanted to be able to offer those students incentives and credit as a part of those enterprises. So we pulled together this work group to take a look at this, and there are the two main policy updates. The first one is the removal of a requirement that the work-based learning experience must be concurrent with the related class. We saw this was a barrier, especially for our block scheduling, but also it was a barrier for high-quality internships that students were being offered in the summer. So we have made the recommendation that we do believe it's important to have a related class for students to gain high-quality skills and knowledge to be able to practice and demonstrate those in a work-based learning environment, but that can also happen right after that class is concluded. So we would like to add that as a possibility for students to be able to start a work-based learning experience right after the conclusion of a class. And also have the opportunity to do that concurrently as well. So again, this removes those barriers and allows for the high quality opportunities that might come in the summer or might come the spring after a fall course for our block scheduling students. This second update is the addition of credit for non-paid internships. Currently in the guide, credit is only able to be awarded for health science clinicals and co-op education. We saw that this was benefiting our health science, marketing, and business students, but was de-incentivizing students in other focus areas, including academic focus areas. And so we really want to be able to offer credit for high-quality experiences, including non-paid internships, apprenticeships for some of our trade areas, et cetera. And I believe those are the main two updates. If, with approval of this guide, we will move forward with other items to make sure that these recommendations can come to play, which is approval of a few new course codes, et cetera. And I am happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, questions? Any questions? Any questions? Okay, if not, is there a motion that we approve? Got a second? Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Casey, thank you. Good job. Good explanation. Now move to item 3D, identification of persistently lowest achieving schools policy. And Aaron will do that.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is essentially a technical correction. The definition of persistently lowest achieving schools, so essentially this is the definition around our lowest 5% of schools are priority schools. As was previously approved by the board, included language that said that these schools would be identified by 3 years of data. We have actually, in our waiver and also in the methodology, we used language that said up to 3 years of data, so at least 2 years, up to 3 years of data. So this is a technical correction to make sure that the definition that you have approved is the same as what we described in our waiver and how we're using this data. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Any questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve? Have a motion, second? Second, okay. Any questions for? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, Aaron, you got the next one also, annual measurable objectives.
Sure. And so you all will remember that as part of our waiver, we established for both the state and for school districts annual measurable objectives in several areas. And one of the things that we had still to do was to establish targets for Algebra 2 and English 3. So I'll describe what you have in front of you and then describe some of the details about it and then take any questions. So essentially, you all have previously approved all of the state and LEA targets except for Algebra 2 and English 3 and the new combined Algebra 1, Algebra 2, English 2, English 3 gap closure targets. So what you have from the state level perspective is new targets for Algebra 2 and English 3, Algebra 1 and 2 gap, English 2 and 3 gap. As well, you have some technical corrections on the data. Most of these are around rounding, so essentially the way that we had done the state methodology, we're now trying to match that to the way we do district methodology and ensure that a way we're rounding in both things is exactly the same, so you'll have a couple of technical corrections there. The largest correction is actually on the economically disadvantaged, non-economically disadvantaged gap comparison in 3 through 8 reading and 3 through 8 math. And the issue there was that last summer, Memphis City Schools had a mistake in the way that they had identified economically disadvantaged students. We were able to correct that, but not able to do that until after you all had approved those targets. So those are the changes that you see in front of you from the state perspective. Just to talk a little bit about the Algebra 2 and English 3 targets and where we are with those. So essentially, the reason that we're adding these are a couple of different reasons. One is we committed to do it in the waiver. The reason we committed to do it in the waiver is because we wanted to ensure that we had more targets that were available at the high school level so that we could balance out high school and 3 through 8, as well as ensuring that we have as many targets as we can that have a college and career readiness benchmark to them, which these targets do. For school districts, you'll see, so you'll also be approving then the LEA version of these targets. So in Algebra 2, school districts range in the amount of growth required from 1.8 to 6.3 percentage points a year. As you see, the state level is 4.2% percentage point gain. In English 3, the range is from 1.7 to 5.3 percentage points, and the state level is 3.9. When we did the Algebra 1, Algebra 2, English 3 combination, just to give you a little bit of a sense of why we did that. So we did those in order to ensure that we could have as many school districts as possible actually have targets in those areas, and combining the two subjects actually allows us to ensure that we have enough students that we can be measuring more of those things for more school districts. As well, because the proficiency levels are quite different between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and between English 2 and English 3, we put those together and then we weighted them in order to account for some of those differences, and as well to account for potential changes in subgroups from one year to the next. And lastly, just to say a little bit about why you have targets for Memphis and the Achievement School District, and to describe a little bit about how we'll do this going forward. So as we go forward, you will get these same targets for the Achievement School District and for Memphis at the time when you approve targets for all districts. We weren't able to do that this year because we were trying to sort through how best to make this happen. And essentially, you're seeing targets here for the Achievement School District, but they're not actually required to be held accountable this year according to federal guidelines. Any school that is a new school has 1 year before you actually hold them accountable. But with the Achievement School District, we made a decision to actually go ahead and set targets for them. These targets are for the Achievement School District. As you can see, in all of the areas, they are required to make growth that is higher than 5 percentage points a year. They actually have the highest targets of any school district in the state, followed closely by Memphis. So the way that we've done this is actually to take any school that the Achievement School District will take they will have targets set for that school, and we then remove that school from the Memphis data. So going forward, what we'll do at the end of the year when we make determinations is the Memphis City Schools, or combined Shelby-Memphis district, will have whatever schools were with that district for that particular year, or any school district that has an Achievement School District school. We then will take out the Achievement School District school and or grades, and the Achievement School District will set targets for those schools, and the school district that had those schools in it will have those schools removed, and that's how we'll set targets going forward. So I know that's a lot of information at once, but any questions?
Questions for Aaron? Aaron, I think it's a really good process that we put in place here of establishing these targets and so forth, tying them back into the targets we've got for the state and so forth. So a great process. And I had a chance last night to look through these numbers, and they all look good. I think you've done a great job of putting that together. I guess the only thing is I wish that it had these numbers before last night to look at it a little bit more carefully. You know, we got them yesterday. So
Yep, apologies on that. We had,
better if we can get them a little bit ahead.
we'll get you all things well ahead of time next time.
But I think it really is a good process, and I commend the department for putting together the process that we're using here to establish these local targets. Mike?
For districts that are unable to meet their target, what happens?
So for those districts that end up in need of improvement or in need of subgroup improvement, essentially a couple of different things happen. One, they go through a more intensive planning process with the centers of regional excellence, the core centers and the core directors. They have meetings with core directors. They will also on occasion have meetings with the commissioner. They are sort of under a higher level of scrutiny from the department's perspective over the course of the year, and there is a more intense level of intervention from the regional office with those districts.
And after that, if they don't meet their targets, then what happens?
So that's a great question, and we haven't been in that situation yet. And when we get there this year, should we have districts that are also in need of improvement or, again, in need of subgroup improvement, I think we'll have to look at, you know, is there a greater level of consequence? But at this point, we don't have any plans.
Okay.
I just have a quick question as it relates to kind of reporting back to us and others as it relates to performance, district performance against these AMOs. At what point will we, you know, really get to assess where they stand against their targets, I guess?
Sure. So the process works like this. We have the testing process that occurs. We then get the data back. We compare at the department how districts did against their goals. We share that information with districts. We let them make an appeal if there's something that looked incorrect from the perspective of their data. If there's something that they feel like, you know, if there's a particular circumstance around something that did not work. And then we make that public. We make that public to you all. We make that public to the public as well. Last year we did that, I think, just right at the end of July, which is probably about the same timeline.
Other questions? Not, is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Next is the Tennessee Instructional Leadership Standard. Paul, going to present that?
Well, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
And we're excited that the revised instructional leadership standards really reflect three significant changes since the passage of the existing TILs in 2008. Number one would be the adoption and implementation of the evaluation model, the team model, and also the other approved teacher evaluation models. Number two would be the implementation of our National Common Core standards. And number three, it would reflect the passage of the National Teacher Leader and Professional Learning Standards adopted by the board in 2011. And so we're confident that these revised instructional leadership standards really capture the momentum in the direction our state is heading, and also to improve instructional leadership in the state. And so we're happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay, any questions for Paul? You know, we had a chance yesterday to review this in a little bit more detail. I pointed out then and will again. I think it's an excellent document. It's well written, it's short, it's focused. Kind of document we've been looking for, so we commend you on that. Any questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Second? Any questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Coach conversion scale. Sarah.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is one that we spoke about yesterday at the workshop as well, but this, as you know, takes into consideration the fact that all LEAs are to have an approved evaluation model that they use annually for evaluations of their teachers and leaders. And it also requires the policy that you passed that those scores annually be reported on a 5-point scale. Project Coach, which you approved in 2011 as an alternate observation model for Hamilton County, used a conversion methodology last year that resulted in a high level of misalignment of their scores. And so had been put on notice in terms of the misalignment between observation and gross scores. But as we looked into it with the district at the end of last year, we realized that it was really about the conversion methodology moving from a 4-point scale to a 5-point scale. So this action item is just to change the conversion methodology used for the Hamilton County Coach model when moving from a 4-point scale to a 5-point scale. And we've worked together with the district to ensure that this new scale really more accurately represents the spectrum of performance as represented on their 4-point model when then reported to the state across a 5-point scale. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions, Carolyn?
Does it change teachers' scores for last year?
It does not. This will be applied this year in 12-13. It will also be applied to the other 3 districts that are now using Coach. But last year, because they have their own data system, the teachers in Hamilton County really were just looking at their 4-point scale score. So there will be a communication that goes out to teachers in Hamilton County that we're working on collaboratively with the district to explain this change in methodology. But we don't expect that it will be an issue because the teachers really had just been focused on their 4-point score last year.
Okay, good question. Okay, other questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion, Gene, second? Lonnie? Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. You've got the next item.
I must stay put.
Yeah, state agency evaluations.
Yes, and this is, again, just an addition to the current policy that would provide state agencies the same allowance that we give charter schools for the purpose of licensure. Again, the top statute around evaluation is specific to teachers who are employed by an LEA, which does not apply to our state agencies in terms of the Department of Corrections, Child Services, and some of those agencies across the state. So for the purpose of licensure, they need to be able to have an evaluation model approved by the board, but are not able to use state test data as required under the top statute. So this is just a slight amendment to the current policy that would add state agency in addition to charter to be able to use an approved model that doesn't include state tests because in this case they don't have state test data.
Okay. Questions? Any questions? Is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second, Gene? Okay, any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good job, appreciate it. Special education guidelines and standard regarding evaluations for specific learning disabilities. Kathleen.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. In 2004, the federal government gave specific guidelines to states on the creation of models of responsiveness to intervention in identifying students with disabilities. At that time, several states adopted models of response to intervention. Our state chose to allow districts choice between what we call a discrepancy model for students with learning disabilities and a model of responsiveness to intervention. That's caused some challenges for our state. We have some districts who use one model, some districts who use another model. We have somewhat a cumbersome process of districts creating their own processes around responsiveness to intervention rather than giving very specific guidelines to districts on what this model should look like. The proposal before you today is to change our model in the state for the purpose of identifying only those students with specific learning disabilities through an intervention model. I provided all of you a packet yesterday to give you some information and feedback on what is responsiveness to intervention. In short discussion, it is basically providing assistance to students who struggle prior to putting them in the path of becoming a student on an IEP or identified with a specific disability. I've also provided for you a reading RTI implementation timeline. Talks a little bit about what we've done so far, the groups we've met with. We've had an RTI task force meeting, and the members of that task force are included in your packet today of who reviewed the plan for the state. We have presented this to the Students with Disabilities Advisory Council, which is the governor's appointed advisory council, and both groups have given their approval and consent to move forward. Our plan is an 18-month plan. We'll begin the process with rolling this out in March at our special education conference and a joint conference on responsiveness to intervention on March 14th, and providing districts guidance over the next 18 months on creating specific plans for their district for this model. So my request today is that you approve this on first reading. We will hold a public hearing for this change in process prior to the April board meeting and bring it back to you in April.
Okay, very good. Questions? Any questions for Kathleen? Yeah, Janet?
I apologize. I wasn't there yesterday for the workshop, and for circumstances I couldn't help, but I'm learning that those workshops are very valuable, so I missed what you had. So I had questions, and I think you answered part of it, but is it my understanding the change is just to get these districts in alignment with what the federal recommendation was, so it's just kind of cleaning up the processes through the district? Is that why?
That's correct. What happened in 2004 is as I mentioned, our state chose allowing districts discretion on whether they would use a discrepancy model for identification or an intervention model. So we have a sort of mixed identification models across our state at this point in time. What we do know is the districts that are using responsiveness to intervention have improved math and reading scores for students and have lowered the identification of disability. And that's very consistent with state findings, across state findings in those states that use responsiveness to intervention models have lowered that identification and raised math and reading scores by about 4% for that particular category. It really varies among states. Some states use this model for every identity of disability. Some states use it for behavior, reading, and math, specific learning disability, and some states use it just for specific learning disability. And our proposal at this time is to focus on that one particular area, students with learning disabilities.
One more question. How many districts are using this model already, and how many are not? Do we know? Do you know that number?
Yeah, it's really interesting. What we have discovered as we've done some investigation on processes across the state is there's 22 models that are approved by the state for responsiveness to intervention in identifying students. But there's probably more than half of our districts that are using these models prior to the referral, but then using some combination of RTI and discrepancy. The challenge with using a discrepancy model, from my experience as a special ed teacher and a special education supervisor, is the fact that a discrepancy model generally does not identify students before third grade. So we're waiting for that gap in between IQ and achievement, and that particularly appears in most students around third or fourth grade. So by that time, those students have lost 3 to 4 years of good intervention that might help them and prevent them in improving their math and reading scores.
Okay. Good. We do need to get Janet a copy of the
yes, I'll
the
take care
handout
of that.
you provided. Kathleen, I think, did an excellent job of putting that together, and it was an education for all. So Janet will get that to you. I think it'd be helpful. And we certainly understand that there's some concern about this, but I think it's, as the board found out, one as much of understanding as anything else, and we hope to clarify those things with the hearing that Kathleen has identified before our next meeting, when we will consider this on final reading. Any other questions, Melvin?
Well, you might have addressed it. We received notice from a group at the University of Tennessee that were very much against this effort to use RTI, the information that you are going to use to identify these individuals. And have you had any dialogue, discussion with the UT group relative to this decision?
I have not engaged in discussion with them yet. I wanted to bring this proposal to you first. I did provide answers and responses to their letter, which was provided in the packet that I shared yesterday, which I will move forward and share with the UT group.
Okay, other questions?
Yes, Kathleen, could you just kind of outline the training that would be necessary for our districts in order to implement this?
Sure, absolutely. If you look at what I provided yesterday, if you happen to have that with you, the reading RTI implementation timeline, we have a concise plan that is consistently across two divisions, our C&I division, Curriculum and Instruction division, and our Special Education division. So we're working hand in hand in creating this model across the state. But as you can see, January, the disclosure of this information was shared with Task Force and with the Advisory Council. Actually, today at the State Department of Education, we have our Reading Leadership Team meeting, and these are individuals from across the state who have intervention models in place. What we're looking at is creating a model of helping our teachers who are currently in school systems have better understanding of foundational reading skills. So there's a real emphasis on helping teachers who are in those foundational years, K-3, in developing best practices in reading. And then in addition to that, there will be modules for teachers and leaders across the state in intervention practices. So a very planned development, which will start at March with our announcement at our RTI conference, moving forward to this summer with very specific training, and then year-long modules in the next year. In addition, on the special education side, we have our data specialist, who is a licensed psychologist, actually an individual who worked in Williamson County as a school psychologist in leading their RTI work in Williamson County. But she comes from Michigan, which had a required model of intervention, and she actually led that work at the State Department in Michigan throughout their process back in 2004, 2005. So very specific work on both sides with the understanding of how we develop this process of identifying students, along with good guidance on what an intervention model should look like in a district.
Okay.
I think it's such a key point of that is response to intervention starts early, kindergarten, and you're not losing the child by the third grade for them to get any help. And that's what's so important about RTI, is that the steps that are taken and you don't lose the child.
The one state that I'd like to point out that made this move back in 2004, 2005 was Florida. And Florida did intensive work around responsiveness to intervention in all of their schools. And if you track the NAEP scores in reading and math for Florida students, you will see significant gains, as well as reduction of the number of students that are inappropriately identified as a student with a specific learning disability versus a student who has not been taught well.
Okay. Other questions? Carolyn, did you have? No. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion, second, Gene. Okay. Any further questions, discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to the action items on final reading. First item is David with transitional licensure policy.
Thank you, Chair and members. Last year, the General Assembly passed Public Chapter 1072, which created a pathway for those who are working in colleges and universities to obtain a limited license to teach at the high school grades 9 through 12. Ask us to promulgate some language around that to affect that. It seemed to make the most sense to weave it into the transitional licensure policy. There are no changes from the first reading. You will see there in Section G, or letter G under Section 2, that those teachers will have to take the same exams that anyone else would have to teach, have to take and pass. They would also be held to the same sorts of in-service training that would be required of any other teacher.
Okay. I think it is important to note that what we're doing is we're really adding 2G to this large document there, but we're adding very little. Okay, Carolyn?
I just wanted to ask about the out-of-state providers that we're expecting, that would be, some of the people who would be using this licensure might be coming from out-of-state schools. Is that correct?
Well, in this particular case, if we're talking about providers, these are generally faculty who are teaching at a community college or a university in Tennessee at this time. More than likely, they would be working with their employing college or university if their college and university decided to offer a program that allowed them to lead into this. Otherwise, they'd have to find another opportunity. Or they're welcome to avail themselves of the other transitional licensure policy options that are in there. Then a university faculty member is not limited to this. They can go get the 712 endorsement in an area too as well.
Okay. Questions for David? Okay, is there a motion to approve on final reading? Got a motion, second? Got a second, Lonnie? Okay, any discussion, questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. David, you've got the next one.
Yes, sir, thank you. In that same session of the General Assembly, we were asked to make recommendations and set standards for virtual class sizes and see if there was any utility around the notion of expanding the student-teacher ratio within the virtual class size. This seems to fit well. I feel like I'm before you every quarter with some sort of type of change to the virtual school policy. That's because this is a place where practice is sort of outpacing our ability to keep up in policy. You're going to see us talk about this a lot over the next several years, which I think is a good thing. In this case, we had a chance to sit down with a lot of folks who are providing content virtually to school, to our students and districts that are running virtual school programs. And it seemed to make sense that if the virtual school is doing a good job, at least they're at least meeting expectations, that would be like a 3, 4, or 5 on that scale, then there should be some opportunity for variance within that. In working with the commissioner and his staff, it seemed to make sense that about 25% would be an appropriate variance. So that's the same recommendation we had for you on first reading, and I bring that for you today to consider.
Questions for David? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
David. Okay, NL.
Mr. Chairman and board members, you have before you on final reading the automatic revocation rule, which basically will add sexual battery by an authority figure and statutory rape by an authority figure as 2 offenses whereby a educator would not have the opportunity for appeal. They would be automatically revoked.
Got a motion second. Any questions, discussion? Okay, this is a rule, requires a roll call vote, so Vicki? Aye. Okay, the motion carries. Appreciate that. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, head lice. Jan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. This is a minor rule change to those rules governing school-administered infant, toddler, preschool, and before and after school programs. It will make the rule in compliance with the current rule of the Tennessee Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control.
Okay, questions? Is there a motion to approve? Got a motion, second? A second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, this is also a rule, so it requires a roll call. Vicki? Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. Motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, let me suggest we've got several curriculum curriculum standards here. Really, F, G, H, I, and J. Let me suggest that we consider those as one. We had a chance to review them on first reading. We made some changes. I think the department's done a good job of addressing some of the issues that we had when we reviewed them on first reading. I believe those have been addressed. Any objection to combining those together, F through J? Okay, is there any questions on any of those items, F through J? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Got a second?
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, don't leave yet. We got to vote. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Now you can leave.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Master plan. Dr. Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been working on the master plan and revising our targets and trajectories for the last 2 or 3 meetings, and we finally have come to a set of numbers that we agree with as in terms of our baselines and our 2014-15 targets. So I would present it to you now for consideration for final approval.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Questions for Gary? Any questions?
Thanks.
Well, I think this is, this really is a significant piece of work. I think it, we've very purposefully aligned it with the department's strategic plan and worked, I think, very cooperatively with the department to set up targets. I think you'll recognize, anybody looking at the targets that we've got in here, that they are very, very aspirational. I think they need to be. I feel really good about the things that we've got in place, and I believe these targets can be achieved, but they're significant targets, and if we're able to achieve them, I certainly hope and believe that we can. It'll be a tremendous step forward. So this is a major piece of work and something that we need to approve here so we can get it on to the legislature as we're required to do. Any other?
I would just agree that I think it's a significant step forward, and it's really aligned with where the department's going and where first to the top was the priority stated and first to the top. And I think, as the commissioner mentioned yesterday about the high expectations that we set for our kids, and that they showed that, we could reach that higher bar. And I think if we can stay aspirational, we can really accelerate academic achievement. So thanks, Gary, for the hard work on this.
Okay, good comment. Any other comments? Let's see, we didn't have a motion yet, did we?
No, not yet.
Got too many of them. Okay, is there a motion that we approve on final reading? Lonnie, Mike, okay. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Appreciate it. Gary, you've got the next one.
When the high school policy was adopted in 2008, new language was included, and around graduating with honors, the old language was removed. We also added graduating with distinctions. The students who would meet all of the ACT benchmarks for readiness, college readiness, would graduate with honors. And if they attained a 3.0 and accomplished one of a variety of activities, they could graduate with distinction. We've had several school systems inquire about developing, in addition to those, developing their own honors recognition programs. And so this is a proposal to make these two state honors and state distinction, and then reinstate the previous language, which would allow LEAs to develop their individual recognition programs for the students who excel. And this is both a policy and a rule change.
Okay, any questions? Questions for Gary? Okay, is there a motion that we approve on final reading? Got a motion? Is there a second? Got a second, Gene? Okay, any further discussion? Okay, this is rule change, so Vicki, if you could call the roll, please. Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is approved. Next item is professional education units. Sarah.
Hello again. Again, as we discussed yesterday, you have a slate of preparation programs that are before you today for board action. And as we mentioned yesterday, 3 of them, Carson Newman, Maryville, and South, we propose all be recommended for full continuing approval. And that's the result of the focus visits and the Board of Examiners, as well as the Commissioner's Advisory Review. The 4th one, Lane College, again, as we discussed yesterday, our recommendation is for denial of approval. And I'm happy to take any questions about that. I know we talked yesterday about what that means in terms of the consequences for the 3-year wait period, et cetera, but happy to take any additional questions today.
Questions? Comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I appreciate very much the contact and concern that you showed me relative to Lane College, which I've been affiliated with. The president, is very much disappointed, but he understands. He knows why, as you have advised him, and he said that he definitely will be ready in 3 years to reapply, and he expresses very much that disappointment that they were not able to meet. There were a lot of internal problems, which I'm sure you were aware of. And I want to say personally, thank you for the consideration that you gave me and my relationship with the school. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Wright, as well, for passing that along.
Thank you. Good comment, Melvin. Okay, other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve the recommendations? Got a motion, Carolyn? Second, Lonnie? Okay. Teresa? Okay, we got a motion, second. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll now move to charter school appeals, and Harry, I think we probably ought to take these one at a time.
I think so.
And let's have the wisdom of your review.
We traveled to Memphis and held a hearing, but I guess the first one is Global Charter School, Global Leadership Academy. Their first application was denied. They resubmitted an amended application on December 18th. They voted to deny the amended application. They appealed to the state board. We received that on December the 18th. And went down and had the hearing and had a lot of great people there. They have, I think, great intentions, but what we saw was that there's more work that needs to be done on their application. When the review committee reviewed their application, they used the Department of Education scoring criteria guide, and in it there are 4 domains, and the school system expects their applicants to pass at least 12, meet at least 12 of the domains in order to be approved. And in the first submission, they had met only one domain, partially met in 9, and does not meet in 4. When the amended application was scored, they received meets requirements in 3, partially meets in 11, and did not have any that did not meet. So they've made progress in moving forward, but they still only met 3 of the domains, so they're still short. The review committee recommended unanimously that the charter application be denied and the Shelby County approved. And following that, you'll find that there's quite a bit of information we've given you on particular domains. But state law requires that the state board review the decision of the local board of education to determine whether denial of the charter is in the best interest of the schools and school district and community. During this January 16th hearing, Shelby County Schools demonstrated that they had employed a rigorous process for screening applications, and they provided concrete and objective reasons why Global Leadership Academy should be denied. Global Leadership Academy provided no concrete evidence to show that the deficiencies cited by Shelby County Schools Review Committee was erroneous. The only comment they made was that they believed that they had adequately addressed the domains. So based on these findings, my recommendation to you is to affirm the decision of the Memphis City Shelby County Unified Board of Education.
Okay. Questions for Gary? Okay, is a motion to approve the recommendation? Got a motion? Second? Okay, any questions or discussion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote, so Vicki? And I'll vote aye also. Yeah, aye. Okay. Okay, Gary, motion is approved, recommendation is approved. Moving to the next one.
Move Ahead School of Scholars, or MASS, followed the same guidelines, the same timeline as the previous one in terms of its applications and its denials. We received their appeal request and held the hearing, and we learned that, again, they need to meet 12 of the 14 areas. In the initial review, they had partially meets in 12 and does not meet in 2. The amended application earned a meets in 3, partially meets in 9, and does not meet in 2 of the domains. So it was significantly short of being ready to be approved. And when you look at these, we go back and think of the opinion from the Attorney General, which says that when a school board votes to approve a charter, then they're ready to sign the contract then. That charter is ready to be approved. No additional work should be needed. And all 3 of these just fall short of that requirement. So as we look at this, you see the scores are deficient. More work needs to be done. However, I think that there's a possibility this one could with some work, could become passable. So we would encourage them to reapply. And my recommendation is that we uphold or affirm the Memphis City Shelby County Unified Board's actions.
Okay. Questions for Gary? Okay. Is there a motion that we approve the recommendation? Motion. Got Teresa. Got a second? Got a second. Okay. Any further discussion, questions? Okay, Vicki, if you could call roll, please. Aye. Okay, the recommendation is approved. Next one, Gary.
Next one, Cesar Chavez Charter Elementary School. Same timeline applies in terms of their denials and appeals. I think we actually received their appeal request on December 27th. It's a little different from the other 2. On their review, in the initial application, the scoring was partially meets in 9 areas and does not meet in 5 areas. The amended application was reviewed, and we have partially meets in 11 and does not meet in 3. So they did not have a single area that was scored as meeting the requirements. Based on that reason, my recommendation is that we uphold the Shelby County Unified Board's, Memphis City Shelby County Unified Board's decision.
Okay, questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve the recommendation? Got a motion, second? Got a second. Okay, any other questions, discussion? Okay, call roll, please. motion is approved. Okay, we'll now move to the teacher license actions. NL.
All right, board members, you have before you the slate of individuals whom we are proposing to either suspend, revoke, and also in this case, you have the first formal reprimands before you this time. So at this time, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Okay. Any questions for NL on any of the recommended actions? Sure, Jen, go ahead.
I don't really have a question about that, but since you're our attorney, I'm just asking a procedural question. I'm assuming because we always have the option if we have a question about an individual that we could bring that up, but we always lump these together. Is it procedural? Is that okay because we can ask? I've just always wondered because we lump them together.
Right. Well, procedurally, it's fine to lump them together, but if there's an individual that you have questions about, then you can remove that one, lump the others together, and then take that one separately.
And that's the process that we have followed. If we have any questions about him, we pull those out and address them separately. Okay. Any questions? And I think here again, as the board recognizes, I think the staff does an excellent job of going through, looking at these in detail, and comparing it to actions we've previously taken with other teachers, and we believe that these are consistent with what we've been doing, what we need to do relative to action. It is regrettable that we have so many of these actions that we need to take, but it seems like it just continues to have about the same number that we need to deal with.
Right, and well, we send notice, and they have the opportunity to request a hearing, and by the time it gets before you, either they have waived their right to a hearing, or we've already gone to a hearing. And most of the time, if they request a hearing and the judge rules in the state board's favor, you never see those because the judge's decision is final.
Okay, is there a motion that we approve these actions? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Somebody got a second? Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, call the roll, please, Vicki. Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you. Good job. Appreciate it. Okay, that concludes our agenda. Any, Gary, you got?
One quick announcement. We have not been able to secure TSBA's room for our next workshop. So the next meeting in April, the workshop will be at David Lipscomb University. And we'll get that in notice, get you directions and notice of that before the meeting, but just want to give you a heads up.
Right. Commissioner, anything you'd like to add here before we adjourn?
No, I want to thank Dr. Nixon and his staff for their hard work. This was a pretty meaty agenda, and I didn't get the chance after the charter school applications to thank them for the work that they put in, and to this board for holding a high bar for schools that are able to operate in the state of Tennessee. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments? Anyplace? Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Let me remind you of our remaining meetings for 2013, April 19th, July 26th, and October the 25th. We will plan to have workshops the day before, and as Gary just talked about it, Lipscomb on April the 18th. With that, appreciate you being here. Good meeting. Drive carefully. Don't get caught in the snow or ice or whatever. Thank you.
Kevin, you got the